Remember that time when you were a human on Innistrad and all you had to worry about were spirits, vampires, werewolves and zombies? Ah, happy days.
So Thalia's Lancer is my favorite human in the set. I really like toolbox style decks, and Thalia's Lancer searches for any legendary creature, so you can play a bunch of different one-ofs that are perfect for the right situation and pick out whichever one you want with Thalia's Lancer. I especially like Thalia's Lancer in a deck with Bruna and Gisela, because you can play one copy of Bruna at the top end. You can also play things from other sets like, one copy of Linvala or another legend that you might like. And then when you have the Lancer, you can sort of figure out what's right for that moment for you to grab and then play and hopefully win with.
Harren's Grace Champion is just a very simple card. It's somewhat reminiscent, actually, of Gavany Township. It doesn't put counters on your creatures. But that idea of you make either a big attack or your opponent attacks you if they think you're lethal, and all of a sudden you have this, creature that comes out, gives your team a bonus, has lifelink. It's really able to turn the tide of battle.
In Shadows over Innistrad, we saw Thalia basically forced to turn against the Church of Avacyn as she recognized that the church had gone astray, following Avacyn's lead, really. So in Eldritch Moon, she really comes into her own, leading a group of heretic Cathars to fight for the ideals of the church rather than the church itself.
Thalia was very popular the first time around in the original Innistrad block. We wanted to have a card that was, similarly sort of a pain in the butt, made it hard to do things, a role player in Modern. This is, she's very good against non-basic lands and just creatures in general, and we'll see if she's too powerful with Collected Company.
So because the Angels are sort of the bad guys, this time we tried to make the spirits kind of feel like the good guys, so they have a lot of positive abilities. So the Mausoleum Wanderer is a spirit that gets bigger and can protect your other spirits from instants and sorceries.
As we were working on the spirits deck and trying to figure out really how to make it something that would look or be more competitive, we realized that we just needed a 1-drop. The blue-white deck was supposed to be pretty aggressive, kind of a disruptive aggressive deck, and it just wasn't. It didn't have any pressure, no early pressure. So I came up with the idea of what if you have this spirit that, as you play spirits, it kind of gets larger, it hits for 2, maybe even 3 per turn, if you can really just keep the pressure on, and then if your opponent tries to actually wipe the board, you've got a way to interact with it.
One of my favorite spirits in the set is Selfless Spirit. I may be slightly biased because I designed the card, but initially started as an actual spirit reward card in that it was the same card as it is now, but it would sacrifice to make your team indestructible only if you had another spirit. One thing that we found as we were testing Constructed is this was just a pretty interesting effect to give white aggressive decks in general, so we wanted to remove that restriction and just made it a generically appealing card.
The zombie deck is a lot about attrition and getting card advantage, and as we were working on the deck, we found that it just needed more ways to draw cards. It had a lot of ways to kind of get things out of the graveyard, a lot of ways to do things, but it was just running out of cards fast in their decks. So this idea of a zombie that says, well, what if, you tap 3 zombies to draw a card, and we had to, we put the lose a life there to make it into a black card, but it really made a way to give these zombie decks a kind of great end game and kind of inevitability against these other mid-range decks who might play larger creatures, but, as you kept making zombies, they might not individually be scary, but when you're drawing 2 or 3 cards a turn off your zombies, you're just going to overwhelm your opponent.
Haunted Dead is such a cool card. I didn't know a zombie could be haunted, but it's Innistrad, and man, it's still next level to me.
Giza and Geralf were characters in flavor text in original Innistrad. And in part of our process, the flavor text comes later in the process. So by the time we realize the flavor text is sort of showing up a certain character, the set's done, the cards are done. And so we realized later in the process, Giza and Geralf are pretty cool, but we don't have cards for them. So what we did is we made a commander product years later, we put them in, it's okay, you guys get Giza and Geralf. So now we're back on Innistrad, and we're okay, Geese and Geralf, we got to make Geese and Geralf. And so we're filling in the set. And then we realize there's not enough space. We don't have space for Geese and Geralf. We're like, okay. What if we combine them into one card? And so one of the reasons that they're together is A, it's kind of nice to see the brother and sister together. But B, we were kind of tight on space.
The Gisa part is the black part of the card, and Geralf is the blue part of the card. So we felt we could capture what players wanted from both characters with just a single card slot in the set.
Giza and Geralf are so awesome. They've really been given an awesome voice, most recently by Alison Lures in her story for Shadows over Innistrad, as this squabbling pair of brother and sister who are constantly sending undead monstrosities to fight each other, this proxy war between the two of them. But as an example of everything that's going on in Innistrad at this point, they end up actually forced to team up and fight together back to back. They have a shared card in the set. Emrakul's presence causes some unlikely alliances, and that might be the most unlikely of all.
Olivia's Dragoon seems pretty inconspicuous. It's 2 mana, 2/2, but in draft, I just remember taking this card so highly and so frequently because the fact that you can, that's efficient already, and the fact that you can just discard a card whenever you want to it, well, you get upside flying, but the main thing is you can turn on your madness, and I'm a synergy player. I just love building decks like that.
Bloodhall Priest is kind of the confluence of all the things that we like in the vampire deck. It's a pretty cheap, it's a 4 mana 4/4 that you can pay for 3 mana if you have Madness, but it itself has a kind of a callback to another fun mechanic of Hellbent, where if you can discard your card, if you're really kind of going all out and playing your stuff and you cast this last, it's going to come into play, deal 2 damage or something. That's pretty strong. But then every turn you attack, as long as you can get rid of that card in your hand, it's shooting something for 2. In terms of a vampire that's really going to be making a big splash for both vampire decks and madness decks, this is it.
Okay, so one of the challenges of the set is we decided that the front of the cards was going to be the Innistrad thing, and the back was going to be the Eldrazi thing. Now, we knew we wanted to do werewolves, but the problem was werewolf didn't fit the model. So we had to come up with a different way to do werewolves. So we said, okay, well, what if let's start with the werewolf. What if on the front side it's the werewolf? You don't have to turn into the werewolf. We're starting with the werewolf. And then the werewolf turns into something even worse than a werewolf. And so we definitely did the werewolf a little bit different, but we really were trying to embrace this idea of the horrors of Innistrad turning into something even worse.
Spirit of the Hun is a werewolf that fits as a nice piece into the werewolf deck where you can flash it out, which is always nice in the werewolf decks because it means you can pass on your turn and let all of your werewolves transform. And its flash ability is very notable, impactful in the current metagame where we expected and anticipated that Languish would become a more and more popular card, and its ability helps. If your opponent plays Languish, you can flash it out in response, give all your werewolves +0/+3 until end of turn, and they all survive that Languish and can likely all come over for the win on the next turn.
So we knew coming into Eldritch Moon design that one of the things that Shadows over Innistrad design had sort of pushed off to us to deliver on was one thing everyone had been asking for and clamoring for, Legendary Werewolf. So very early on in the process, we were like, okay, this is a bullet point. This is one thing we need to deliver on. Let's get to work making this Legendary Werewolf.
One of the things that we often find is people like patterns, and they get really upset when you break patterns. And so the fact that every card in this set was colorless in the back, it was a big deal, and it was something that the set was trying very hard to do. And so the fact that there's one that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb is something we knew people would react to, and for better or worse, but it's something that we also knew that was really important. I mean, if there was going to be one card that we spent this kind of equity on, it'd be something like Ulrich, the legendary werewolf that people have been clamoring for the last really 5 years.
So Emrakul's imprisoned in the moon. I didn't see that one coming. But it's going to be a while before Innistrad's back to normal. So next time we'll visit a plane in much happier shape. A plane of invention, a plane of limitless possibilities, a plane called Kaladesh. But until we meet again on Inside R&D, for all the people here at Wizards of the Coast, I'm your host, Rich Hagan, saying bye.